Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Goldblatt, Assistant Managing Editor at TheWrap. Welcome to the Wrap's award series screening of 000, presented by Amazon. Today, we have a special surprise as we have the honor of introducing writer-director Paul Schrader as the moderator for this Q&A. We'll be kicking off tonight's event with the trailer of 000 and then go right into Paul's conversation with Gina Gardini, the executive producer, and series stars Andrea Riseborough and Harold Torres. We hope you all enjoy.
You know why we're not going to lose money in this? Because what we do keeps the world's economy afloat. Don't ever forget that.
Dare di mangiare a tutta gente nostra servono assai sorti.
La única ley que realmente importa en la guerra es que tus hermanos están a tu lado.
Cattai 5.000 chili, mechi i prezzi sempre.
Ya tenemos listas las 5,000 latas de chile que pidieron para Italia.
You're gambling all of your assets on one shipment.
If we don't continue to broker cocaine, this company ceases to exist.
My brother will personally escort the load from start to finish.
We want to meet your Mexican friend and ship the merchandise.
Our father's not throwing rules that buyers and sellers are connected by brokers.
Stiamo picchiando carico.
I need you to tell me what is going on. Why are you trying to start an engine fire?
Un carico libero.
E se non arriva?
Allora i nemici mi vincono.
Y aquí nos entrenó para ser los mejores. Y lo somos.
Bottom line, what's it going to take for me to get my cargo delivered safely?
No puedo tener un chivatón en mi equipo. We gotta go. So please go. Go!
What was Dad's number one rule?
Money solves everything.
Exactly, kiddo.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Schrader, and I'm going to be moderating this panel, I think, for about 45 minutes about the Amazon Prime series, an 8-part episode, which follows it's a very well-mounted international thriller which follows a cocaine shipment through Mexico and involving New Orleans and into Africa, Dakar, and Casablanca, and eventually to its destination in Cumbria. It's not Cumbria. I just said Cumbria. Is it Cumbria?
Calabria.
Calabria. Cumbria is someplace else. And the story which is in the news right now because there's just a huge bust in Salerno opiates, the largest in the world, that happened yesterday. Anyway, how I ended up here is one of those curiosities of this superabundance of audiovisual material on the internet. So you need to sort of rely on friends and social networks to get your way through so much of this material. And that's one of the ways I use Facebook, because everybody I know on Facebook, if they recommend something, I pay attention. And so Brett Ellis had recommended I see 000, and so I did see it, and I liked it a lot. I particularly was impressed with Harold Torres' performance, which to me was a mirror image of Toshiro Mifune in High and Low. And lo and behold, the next day, Harold answered me back and saw the Kurosawa film and said, "Yeah, you're damn right." It is a remarkable similarity. And then a few other directors like Wayne Kramer jumped on and said, you know, he's terrific. And then Amazon said, why don't you do this? So here I am. And so I'm going to start throwing out some questions. And the first, I'm supposed to introduce you now, which is Gina Gardini from Catalaya. And I think your names are on the screen. Andrea Riseborough, who plays Emma Linwood, who has an extraordinary CV. Not Emma, but Andrea. Harold Torres, Manuel Contreras, and Vincent de la Vega is here, and he's going to be translating for Harold when necessary. So the way I guess to start is, I would say this apparently started with a book written by the author of Gomorrah. And Gina, you want to say the origins of the project?
Sure. Stefano and I had developed and produced the series Gomorrah, which is an adaptation of Roberto's book, and had also been adapted as a film by Matteo Garrone. When Roberto pitched the book, there were only 7 pages. And the first 7 pages of this book is a monologue, a first-person monologue, which describes your life and how everything that is involved in your life, revolved around your life, touching your life, whether you use it, you buy it, you sell it, never seen it, is affected by cocaine. And this larger theme that cocaine is the most widely distributed commodity in the world, that it sustains the global economy, and without it, there'd be an economic collapse on a level that's never been seen before. And this sort of idea of making another crime series, but on a massive global stage, was what intrigued us. The book has very, very little to do with our series, but it's the underlining theme that compelled us to move forward. And we spent 3 years just crisscrossing the globe, took a very journalistic, investigative approach in developing the series before we even wrote the concept. And, you know, exploring how cocaine touches various parts of the world in a very similar fashion. And then from there, we came up with the idea of following a single shipment of cocaine, a massive shipment of cocaine, and approaching our story with 3 main worlds: the people who buy it, the people who sell it, and the people who broker the deal. And that's sort of how our process began. It's a very long journey, as our actors also know. The project from start to finish was over 5 years between research, development, shooting, post, and finally launching on Amazon Prime.
So how many days shooting was it?
151.
And obviously with time to restage every time you move.
I mean, you know, one of the things about this show was that we approached it very much the way you approach European filmmaking or television, i.e. we cross-bordered the entire series and we shot out by continent. So we were never shooting out episodes. I mean, the last place we shot was Senegal, and that's episode 4.
So what were your orders of travel? Where did you start and where did you finish?
We started in New Orleans, moved on to Mexico, Then we had slight overlap while we were in Mexico, as we had 3 directors. And so as Stefano finished Mexico, he moved on to Italy while Janos and Pablo Trapero were finishing Mexico. So then we shot Italy, and then we moved into Africa, starting first in our Moroccan and desert locations and finishing in Casablanca. And so we had a core crew that moved from continent to continent. And then literally 3/4 of our crew would be local. So it was you know, we traveled 100 crew from continent to continent, as well as all of our equipment. That was probably the most difficult aspect, in addition to the cargo ship, where we shot on a real cargo ship in the middle of the. We weren't in the middle of the Atlantic, but we were in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico.
Andrea, this.
So I think we might need to pause for 1 second. Andrea had to leave the stream, and she's going to jump back in to refresh.
Oh, okay. So let me ask Harold, what level of research is involved, and I mean, into your character, and was there an element of personal risk involved?
I think the first thing that I started to research in that moment was like read the books about all the narcotraffic in America Latina and around the world. I read the book of Roberto Saviano, and I take something very important for me. So this book is the character of the Chango. There is a Colombian drug dealer that started life being as a protector of his own family and his own community, and after that they start to fight against the guerrilla, and after that they start to fight against the narco, and after that start to fight with the government, and in some moment he starts to be a narco. And that was very, very interesting to me, to try to check this change between to try to be good and ending being a very bad guy. So this one of the parts that I used, and I did a long time ago a movie about this kind of church, the church that we saw in the TV series, New Pentecostal Evangelical, and I was inside one day in that kind of church, and I start to read up many things about it. But the level of religious of my character is like he got aligned directly with God. It's like religion came to religare. It's like this reunion with God, and I start to work in that way. Reading some mystics, poets, for example, San Juan de la Cruz, and I work in many other ways. And what was the risk about this character is because he, even in the screenplay, is a very contrast character. He got very different opposite sides. For one hand, he's a murderer, he's assassin, he's Goldblatt, and for the other one, he's a very religious man and a really believer. And to try to mix these things to create one person was the most difficult. And I think I start to think that is not my approach to this character is not like intellectual. I start to think that somebody is not even the people don't believe, but they need to believe. And it's when I decide that I gonna just make a fact that he was he was a believer, and everything that he received, the ideas that he got, that God sent him, is like his hand is the justice. So was a very risk to do the mix between the action scenes with these other not too much talk scenes for me.
Well, you know, often when you're preparing a film, I like to get the actor in touch with someone quite similar to his character, either professionally morally, intellectually, and so they can start to see what the real person looks like and acts like. So did you find anyone in that world that you could spend time with? And did you feel at any point threatened by this?
¿Me puedes ayudar un poco?
A mí me gusta cuando hay un personaje, ponerlo en contacto con una persona que tiene las mismas características que va a él a tener en el papel. ¿Tuviste tú que hablar con algún personaje, alguna persona de la cual para poder obtener información sobre él? ¿Y esto fue algo riesgoso para ti?
No, in that moment, but I made many research before, and because for me, I think, for example, in Ted Bundy, in the level that he's murdered, but he come back to his home and don't have any troubles with to lie with his wife. And for me, this is a psychological and pathological, or another sense. But for me, it was more interesting to think that he don't lie to anybody. He believes in that way. So when I was when I start to prepare the character, I was working with military people and the stunt people to help me to get this way to move, this control of the weapons, this control of everything. And I take something of these guys because they gave me the feeling to go inside of this character. Even if, for example, the most important thing for me is like they think that, or they prepare to be cold, to don't feel sentimental or something when they need to confront to the other criminals or other army or whatever. And in other way, yes, I went to the church and in other time, and I start to try to go inside, but I didn't have any reference directly as that, but because I did in the past other jobs that gave me the opportunity to go inside. But for me, in this project specifically, was more interesting to start to think that how I connect this in my mind as a completely new character, because I never did something before, some character with these both sides completely different.
Yeah, I want to get back to you, but first I'm going to ask Andrea. I've seen a fair number of your films, but this seems to be the most cold-blooded character you've ever played. What was that, the attraction?
Yeah, it's funny because I'd never seen Emma as cold-blooded, but maybe it's just something naturally in me that comes up.
But she's a pretty icy piece of work.
You know, I think what's interesting about Emma, or what was interesting about the prospect of playing Emma, because as Gina mentioned, you know, really when we stepped into this, even us as actors had so little information. You know, we didn't have the all of the scripts. We didn't know exactly what the trajectory of the character was going to be. Lots of things we'd written. We had the book, which was fantastic, and such a brilliant book, so interesting. But I think Gina also mentioned the first section of Roberto Saviano's book, and that was really important for me as Emma. You know, it basically talks you through honor, an honor of sorts, and it's not a mythological honor. It's not it's a very sort of both spiritual and base honor.
If I'm wrong, but have you ever played a character this dark before?
Have I ever played a character this dark before? Yes, I played Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, but she did it with proxies. This character does it up front.
It didn't make her any less dark. I thought one of the interesting things about Emma was that she was in this world of honor, and she was outside of sex in a sense. She was outside of, you know, she sort of transcends gender in a sense.
Well, really, I mean, one of the surprising, kind of invigorating things is both you and DeHaan have a kind of warm, gentle persona. And both of you are playing really, I see it, going to a place that I had not seen you go before. And also the same was true with Harold. I looked at a few clips from your earlier work, Harold, and I didn't see this look. I mean, this look you have right now and you have in the movie. Is that a first for you?
¿Me ayudas, por favor? Vi algunos de los clips tuyos anteriores y nunca vi ese aspecto que tienes tú ahorita mismo, el aspecto que tienes en tu personaje. ¿Esto es algo nuevo para ti?
Yes, it's the first time that I use that kind of style. But was very interesting how we decide to do this design of character with the team of hair, makeup, and all these things. Because when we start to design this, we need a haircut, military haircut, but with Giorgio, we cut the hair with a big long in the back of my head, we start to put more until we had a completely clean back, because it was necessary for the military regulations. And for other hand, we put with Mauricio, put one dove tattoo, just to trying to for the back is like the vampire, the surname of my character, nickname of my character, and the front is like the dove. So this like to try to play with this to try to make fun with this creation of the character. And yeah, it's the first time that I use this look. Right now I cut a little bit my hair, but because I need to do by myself, because I didn't want to replace. And when I was younger, I cut all the time by myself with like as a punk, and because I love it. But this is the first time that I use this way of the style. And what's interesting that when you said about Toshiro Mifune, I never watched this movie before. I just watched Anima Strujano. It's a Mexican movie. And I never thought that that movie was from a Japanese actor. And after that, I knew about it. But was very surprised when I watched the movie that you said, High and Low, because it's an amazing movie. But was a very, very similarities. And I remember when we decided with Veronica Fragola to put this white jacket, was because was a decision to try to put some light colors in my character to contrast the civil time with the war time.
Gina?
Yes.
Something I've wondered about, because I've never done television, and usually when I approach an actor, I say something like, "We can get you in and out in 5 weeks, 4 weeks." You know, that becomes part of the appeal. So how do you go about getting actors when you have to say, you have to give me a year of your life?
And unfortunately with 000 it was a little bit longer than that. Not all of our main characters were in each continent. So there were contained time periods where they had time off and were able, in some cases, to see other films or other projects in between. But, when you sign on to a show like 000, aware or unaware, I don't know how aware any of us were about how complex the shoot would be, just on the paper, and the approach that our actors knew we were going to take, which was shoot fully in practical locations and shooting out by continent. You go into it because you love the project, and it was really kismet in terms of Andrea, Harold, Dane, all of our main characters, in the sense that, I make Gamora, and before we cast our lead in season 1, we saw 1,300 actors. In terms of Andrea and Harold, we got, thankfully, exactly who we dreamed could play those roles. And it worked out. It worked out.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Harold and Andrea, which of these locations was the most interesting for you, experientially?
¿Cuál de estos sitios fue el más interesante?
Yes, I understand.
Las experiencias.
First the ladies, please, Andrea.
Thank you, Harold. God, I mean, they were all just so extraordinary and totally different. I think in some ways, I mean, we spent probably 3 months off and on in Morocco. We spent a long time in Senegal, so much time in Mexico. And I think probably the place that I remember shooting most distinctly was that very small town in Calabria that had been abandoned in 1973 because there'd been an earthquake there, and there were literally people's bills, like their utility bills from 1973 just left in the buildings. It was just an abandoned town. The only thing that were there were 2 little rabid puppies that we ended up helping down the mountain. But that was a really memorable time, and also the scenes were so memorable toward the end of the series. Working with those actors was really fantastic. One of my other favorite moments was when Harold and I come together at the end. I mean, you're just an extraordinary actor, Harold. Don't be embarrassed. Be embarrassed.
Yeah, I enjoy very much this scene, and well, it was amazing to work with you in that moment. And well, we talk later. But I think one of the most interesting things about the power of this all these location was, for example, in Mexico, we work in 3 different places that is very different between them. For example, we was working in the near to the sea in Veracruz, and we were working in the Monterrey, in one of the most richest place around all Latin America, San Pedro de la Garza. But for other hand, we work in one of in the suburbs of Mexico City, and is the poorest place in that way. So we for that, I think this global TV series shows us in other way all the repercussions in the different classes, in the different status social classes, and that was for me very strong to work in that places.
Yeah, well, Gina, I last year I was going to do a film in Mexico with Ethan and Will, and we couldn't raise enough money. But one of our problems was it ended up in what's the big drug province just south of Texas?
Sinaloa? No.
Yeah, it ended up there, and everybody said you can't go there. And they said on Ticaro, they were north of the border. When they went south of the border, they went with military support. And so I was watching the series, and I'm saying, you are really in some tough locations. And did you dress them to look worse, or did you actually go in those areas that are, as they say, sketchy?
No, we actually went there. We actually went to those places, and there's nothing sort of manufactured or made to look worse. But in all honesty, Mexico was the most challenging of all our locations. We had spent the most time in Mexico because we actually were shooting 6 months there, and despite the years of going back and forth, the months of prep. After 3 days of shooting, we were shut down because our shoot coincided with the national elections. But it wasn't just the national elections. It was national, state, municipal, neighborhood. And as Harold knows, Federales came to our set pointing guns and basically said, get out of town. And that was the biggest issue because it had a snowball effect on us. We had to shut down and re-prep and move location in Mexico. So Mexico, that said, our experience was incredible. Obviously, they have a huge film and television industry. The talent there is extraordinary. We got caught in the political crossfires, but never got caught in the criminal crossfires, which was what we had expected more than political resistance. But you know, you need to spend a lot of time there before you figure out how to get it done.
Yeah, can you get insurance in those areas?
No, unfortunately not. And what happened was, because we had to shut down and start again, and we were going from continent to continent, it had a snowball effect on all of our other locations. So it was, you know, there is no force majeure if the government says you can't shoot because we're having national elections, or you can't shoot there because we're having national elections. And it was understandable why people who were in the middle of political campaigns didn't necessarily want to see their country in that moment disrupted by a very complex shoot. We weren't doing easy things. We were hanging people off bridges. We were having huge firefights. You know, we needed to close down highways, things that would inconvenience.
Did you ever think about shooting north of the border?
Never, never. Never. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons the shows that Stefano and I make are distinctive and have had a spotlight on the global stage, is that everything we do, we shoot where it actually happens. It's sort of our core principle. So that was never an option.
Well, one of the strongest, I was wondering how this series was going to conclude. And I really like this idea that these two characters involved, very criminal characters, but involved in a kind of moral complexity. You know, one tells his new love that he killed her old love. And one, Andrea, you end up, you shoot somebody at the end, right? I know Dahan dies, and then you go and kill somebody, right?
At the end, Gina, you're probably best explaining this.
So in the end, with Emma doesn't necessarily pull the trigger, and it's not necessarily a gun. It's a knife, but Emma basically asks Minu, the head of the Indabagata, to kill his grandson as to avenge her brother's death. And that's the price he has to pay to get his.
Yeah. So that's
pretty much the same as killing somebody, but you know, she keeps that.
Yes, hilarious.
Well, what I like about the ending is both these characters do something close to repellent, and something that would make them turn on each other. And they get together and they say, let's get back to work. Let's make some money. And that goes to your point, Gina, of what the cocaine train is all about. You know, they talk about family and honor and blah, 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 but it's really money.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that. One of our goals with 000 was, you know, it's a character study. I think, you know, Manuel, Emma, Chris, Minu, and Stefano are incredibly contradictory, but at the same time have great humanity. Not that we mythologize them or idolize them, but it was important for us that not that we would necessarily empathize with these characters, that maybe we could understand these characters. And, you know, there is not one character in our story who has a happy ending. You know what I mean? Like, they're all sort of doomed and destined to this incredibly horrible fate. And, you know, this was sort of important because it's sort of what the cocaine trade does to everybody's lives, without making a moral judgment. But that's sort of what, you know.
Speaking of which, I think some listeners, viewers, might be interested to know what the title means, because I had to be told.
So in Italy, there are various levels of purity in flour, just regular flour, and there's type 0, and type 00 is the most pure. So Roberto had to play on that, creating something even more pure than 00 flour, and it's 000.
And that's never mentioned in the series, is it?
No, no.
I like that.
Well, it's never mentioned in the book either.
So earlier, Harold and Andrea, you were talking about that the final scene, which I guess was shot somewhere in the middle of the production.
It was, yes. It was actually shot not early on. It was maybe slap bang in the middle of the
production. It was in the middle.
Yeah.
And so, how did you calibrate how to do that?
Originally, that scene for me was in Russian, wasn't it, Gina? I think for a hot minute. We had to go at that and decided American, you know, something like that would be better. You know, it was such a, in a sense, because of the way that Gina and Stefano had planned, really everybody involved had planned the shooting of the series. It was, in a sense, as an actor, it was like turning up in each situation because it was so brilliantly laid out, you know. As Emma, I walked into to a complete tumult of blood and it's the sadness of a family gathering gone very wrong. And I think it was just important because you never, hardly ever, unless you're working with Mike Lee, shooting sequentially, able to, you know, see the whole landscape of the piece at once, to just be present with where we were, I think, and to take in the reality of the situation, and to know what's gone before. So I think that's what I did.
I'm reminded I had to do a film once where we had some production problems and we couldn't shoot the first 2 days. And I was with Willem and we had something to shoot the second day. I had to have something. And the only thing he had alone was his final speech at the end. And he hadn't done anything yet. And I said, Willem, can you do the ending on the first day? He said, no, don't ask me to do that. And then about 15 minutes later, he called me back. He said, I'm an actor. I can do that. And that's what actors do.
Yes.
Well, in a strange way, it sort of maps out your trajectory, you know, in an odd way. If you do it halfway through, you know where you've got to get to at the end. It's surreal. It's very odd. And I did start with Mike Lee, so I got very confused when I had to do everything backwards when I started making other films. I guess I couldn't believe we were going to do it all in order, you know.
And when I did that scene with Andrea, I didn't know that wanna be the ending of the TV series, the whole season. And but I tried to. But I remember when I was working with her, I tried to be in the same level of strong. I think this TV series got all the characters. They are very strong, and that makes the level of discussion very, very high. And I was thinking very much about how they gonna be together in that moment. And the only thing that was important for me is that not to try to be intimidate her and don't try to be like more evil than the character it is. And was a very important in all my work with this character to try to don't play in that way. And for other hand, to don't try to be charm. But I remember this scene, even if we just said two things with the great Emma, great Andrea, was a very good memory in my mind, because it's a very strong scene and I feel something that very, very, very important in that moment. Even if I didn't know that is the end of the story, and even if I didn't know all what happened with Emma, because I didn't read some chapters that don't happen in Mexico. So it was amazing to confront the reality of her and my reality, even if we didn't know the reality of the others.
Yeah, we're starting to run down on time, and they asked me from Amazon to have Gina speak about the score and how that came about.
We were in Mexico. We were in Mexico scouting, and we still. Mogwai was a band that Stefano and I had always loved and had thought about for a film that we had made together several years prior, and they weren't available. And we were in Mexico scouting, and we found out that Mogwai was doing a show in Mexico City. And so we got in a car and we went over to their sound check. And in the process, they had become huge fans of Gamora. And we literally went to their sound check, got to hear them play, and had a 5-minute conversation. And they're like, yeah, we're into it. We love it. We love Gamora. We'd love to work with you guys. And that's how it started. So again, kismet. They were very, very involved in terms of reading the scripts, looking at rough cuts. Stefano is incredibly specific and attuned to the kind of music that he envisions for his work. And so it was a constant dialogue. It was a constant dialogue of...
how many minutes of music did they do?
In terms of minutes, I don't have that off the top of my head, but almost 15 themes.
Yeah. Is there a soundtrack?
No, we don't have a soundtrack. I mean, I guess we should be making a soundtrack. I have to ask Amazon.
Well, if they retain their rights, they're probably up to making one right now.
No, I don't believe so, but we have to get into that because people love the music. It's incredibly haunting.
So, I don't know quite. I'm running out of things to talk about. I mean, what I did particularly like, and I forget the actor's name, but then the evil grandfather.
Oof.
His name is Adriano Tremida, and he had been retired from acting for a number of years. One of the last things he did was something that Stefano and I had done 12 years ago or so. Predominantly a theater actor, and yeah, he's fantastic. He's fantastic. He's amazing. He came out of retirement for us.
And I'm not familiar with his work, but had he played that kind of character before?
A bit, because he's of Sicilian origin, and so in the typical typecasting, he certainly had played criminal or mafia bosses. But the big difference here is that the 'Ndrangheta, or the Calabrian organized crime syndicate, is a barely known phenomenon. People know about Cosa Nostra in Sicily or Camorra in Naples, but very few know about this because it's an incredibly sort of closed community. They're all blood relatives. And if you ask anybody in Calabria if the Ndrangheta exists, it doesn't. So, again, that was one of the challenges and beauties of making Zero was exploring this world that very few people know about.
And you earlier talking about the buyers, the sellers, and the brokers. Andrea, I assume, is a broker.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what is Harold?
Well, I mean, Harold and his group of soldiers, in many ways, a veiled sort of story about the Zetas, which was a cartel in Mexico that started out as a group of Mexican soldiers that then got corrupted, but got so good at what they did, they took out the cartel they were protecting and became their own cartel. So, you know, while Manuel starts on the other side, i.e. part of the special forces, a Mexican, GAFA, Mexican special forces against the narcos, his group transforms and becomes their own cartel. So he's going to become a seller eventually.
I mean, I think one of the most shocking things is the mass execution of civilians, which for me almost came out of nowhere. You were watching this thing, hey, what are they up to? Are they going to commandeer the bus? And then all of a sudden you're realizing they're doing mass execution to make a point. And do you have any reservations about doing that, Harold?
Una de las cosas que me sorprendió más fueron estas ejecuciones masivas. Y entonces me sorprendió porque vino de la nada. ¿A ti tienes algo que decirme sobre eso, Harold? ¿Cómo te impactó?
Yeah, well, we had one scene before that when my character watched some girl dying in front of him, and I think in that moment it started to change the mind of Manuel, because for the beginnings, as Gina said, my character was a flesh canyon, as all the soldiers that died in that kind of wars that happened in my country in the last years. And was the difficult to represent that kind of things is that happened in my country and in other countries, but we don't know. We don't have the opportunity to watch that things. But even if it was hard to do that scenes, and for example, one before when I find the first drug dealer that I need to fight again and struggle with him, and was in other way for me I think my character is the only one that he didn't have family. He's a marginal in some way, and I think all these soldiers, all these people that going inside of the army is because they get the tendency to go inside of that kind of things, and even the people that go inside to that kind of church is because they need to believe in something. And for me, it was very hard. It's very, very, very dark to do that scenes, because I was thinking of all that people that is for necessity to go inside of this phenomenon, and for the other hand, I think this TV series shows when somebody in Paris received 1 gram of cocaine, maybe many others died in other countries.
Thank you all for joining us for the 000 panel. I'd like to thank the panelists, Gina, Andrea, and Dane, and Vincente for your assistance.